Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the FAMvestor podcast. This is episode 18. I am your host, Sunmarie Burns.
And I'm your co-host, Sunny Burns.
And today we have a very exciting episode. It's a little bit different than the episodes we've had so far. We're going to be speaking with Paul Stephan about the military and how he saved $144,000 in just under 4 years while in the military service.
Right.
So a very inspiring, motivational episode with a lot of great financial tips and advice. I think we can all gain something valuable from
Not
this.
just for military. Definitely if you're currently enlisted or in the military, it'll definitely help out. A lot of tips there specifically with like GI bills, tuition assistance, free healthcare, and going into like eating in barracks and chow hall, and a lot of pertinent tips, but just the whole mindset and idea of financial independence and all the tips and strategies he gives is kind of universal principles.
Right. So even if you're not in the military or going into the military, there's so much that can be gleaned from this as well, just on financial savviness and how to think and plan for your future to eventually reach a state of financial independence to retire early.
Right. So just a quick overview of what's been going on with the podcast. So we are up to over 4,000 listens now. So thanks everyone for listening. That's awesome. We also have 93 reviews on iTunes. So, we want to get to that 100 mark, and maybe we'll do some cool shout outs for the last 7 or so that put in those ratings and reviews. So just hop on iTunes. If you can just click on that podcast app and give us those 5 stars and write a quick review, we'd love to shout out your name. And thanks to everyone who's been listening. I was just talking to my supervisor, my boss's boss actually, and he actually became a listener, subscribed, so it's really cool talking to him about it. So shout out to Lieutenant Colonel. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Military episode. Shout out to my Lieutenant Colonel. So sweet. And thanks again for everyone supporting the show. Check out these cool postcards we just got made if you're looking on the YouTube channel to advertise, and keep it going. So definitely, if you've been getting enjoyment from the show, if you feel it's valuable, definitely share it with your friends, share it with your loved ones, trying to get the word out to as many people as possible. So with that, we're going to go right into the show. Enjoy.
You're listening to the FAMvestor podcast. If you're looking to raise your family with intention, gain financial independence, and live a life of true freedom, you're in the right place. Join us as we explore together how to create thriving families, because strong families are the cornerstone for a world at peace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of the FAMvestor podcast. We're here today with a guest I actually spoke with a year ago on the stage, and he has a really cool story and a great financial group and financial background. And what really kind of motivated me to get him on the show was the fact that he was 8 years in the Air Force, and he left the Air Force with $144,000 in his pocket, which is pretty incredible and very unusual. A lot of these military retirees or leaving the military, they don't have a penny in their pocket because they didn't know how to handle their money, and they just bought fancy new cars and whatever they wanted. But Paul was very disciplined, and he was able to leave with such a great net worth, and that kind of snowballed to the trajectory he's now at and his financial independence goals. So we're going to be excited to dive in deep there, and just excited to dive into his story. So let's all welcome Paul to the show. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I think just to kind of get started, let's kind of hear about maybe how you were kind of grew up and what you were taught about money, and just like your origin story in terms of family, finance, and freedom.
Sure. So I had a pretty unorthodox childhood. I was pretty sheltered. My parents were immigrants. I didn't have that many friends. I grew up really poor in Queens, New York. I had no safety net, and so I had to learn how to be self-reliant. When I was 9, me and my sister started selling things around the block to support the family. We started off with candy, then we moved on to cake and flowers. I hated it, but my father didn't have a very high-paying job, and my mom didn't work because she was caring for all the kids. And this started because there was a kid down the street. His name was Richard. He came up with the idea to sell. He had like a candy, and he came up with the idea to sell it to a passerby. And he took that money and went across the street to the corner store, the bodega, bought some more candy, repeated the process. And then after about an hour, we had a big box of candy and a few bucks. And we split it. We split the candy and the money.
Brilliant. 9 years old, you said?
I was 9, yeah. He came up with the idea, but when I came home and brought the candy and the money to show my mom all excited, of course I wasn't allowed to eat the candy, but that gave her the idea that, we could actually help support the family by selling some stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I kind of remember back when I was probably around that same age, I would always, I'd set up a little living room store, and I would ride my bicycle to the local CVS, buy these bulk bags of candy, and then sell them piecemeal to my siblings.
Oh, you did that too?
I wasn't, you were working with your siblings to provide money to your family. I was making money off my family. So a little different.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty
when
amazing.
I was 9 years old, I was the kid buying the stuff of the kid of the kids selling it on my block. So there you go.
Well, there always has to be a consumer for someone to make money. My parents would actually fight a lot, mostly about money. And I hated it so much. I wanted to bring some money home and just say, here's the money you guys are fighting about, plunk it on the table, stop fighting for at least a month, And my whole life I've been looking for ways to solve problems. Especially like that. I'm not a big fan of conflict. I always try to be the peacemaker. I want to make things okay, make things run smoothly. And I read an article recently, maybe a year or two ago, that said that 2/3 of life's problems can be solved with enough money. For example, if you have health issues, you can hire the best doctors. If you have a crappy job, crappy boss, you can just, wash your hands and leave and find another job or not have to work, So money solves 2/3 of life's problems. And the other 1/3 are like mental issues or interpersonal issues. People, you can't stand people. The rich and poor alike deal with those problems. And so if money solves 2/3 of your problems, why not devote up to 2/3 of your time and effort to fixing those problems, to getting enough money so you can solve those problems? And so ever since then, ever since I was a kid, I had the mentality of wanting to pursue FIRE, which some people recognize as the acronym for Financial Independent Retire Early. And that's essentially having enough money, producing passive income that you don't have to work ever again. And I wanted to, as a kid, I wanted to achieve FIRE, but I didn't know the name of the concept. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't understand money. How to make it. I didn't think it was possible. But I found out later in life that it was most definitely possible to achieve FIRE, and a lot sooner than most people think. And so let me talk a little bit about FIRE. So most financial independence people take the 4% rule, which let me just pull up the internet so I don't fumble through this. So the 4% rule, I'll read it from here. It was created using historical data on stock and bond returns over the 50-year period from 1926 to 1976. Dr. William Bengen, who was a financial advisor, conducted an exhaustive study of historical returns in 1994, focusing heavily on the severe market downturns of the 1930s and 70s. And he concluded that even during bad markets, there was no historical case in which a 4% annual withdrawal rate exhausted a retirement portfolio in less than 33 years. So basically, you can withdraw 4% of your money in the first year and then have it increase annually with inflation. So that's the inverse of 4% is 25. So if you're able to accumulate 25 times your annual expenses, or if we want to look at it from a monthly perspective, which more people can probably relate to, 25 times 12 is 300. So if you've saved 300 times your monthly expenses and it's invested in stocks and bonds, you can afford to retire forever. I know the study said 33 years, but they've shown that if you drag it out longer to like 60-year periods, it's still successful in like 96 or 92%, most of the cases.
Interesting.
So like a 4% of like $1 million is like $40,000, right? So if you can, if your expenses equal to $40,000 a year, and you had $1 million in these stocks and bonds, then you would be essentially financially independent at that point. Is that right?
Right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And if you needed to spend more, like $80,000, then you'd need $2 million stocked away, and you could live off 4% of $2 million, which is $80,000 a year. And then how much, so you take out 4%, but what is it growing at typically?
The stock market historically has returned anywhere between 8 and 10%, depending on what period you're looking at. So most people just take the conservative version, like the lower amount, because, you can't expect good times don't tend to last forever, So we're just looking on a more conservative, risk averse side, and that's about 8% annually.
So even while you're taking this 4%, it's your money is still growing. Like if you have
Right,
$1 million and you're taking $40,000 a year, it should still, on average, keep going up. So next year it wouldn't be $1 million, be $1 million, and a couple tens of thousands of dollars.
It would be it would be $1,080,000 after 8%. You take out 40,000, then you have $1,040,000,
right.
And the following year would be more and more and more and more. Of course, your withdrawals would increase annually with inflation, and that's built into the FI model. So there's a lot more that goes into it, but it's definitely a good rule of thumb that people use on how much money they're going to need to retire.
So there's an actual number that you can help calculate whether you're going to be financially free or not.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually what got me started on FI when I realized, I think Mr. Money Mustache, have you guys heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So he I think is the person that got me started, that showed me there was actually a finish line, because when you don't have a finish line, you don't have a goal, you're just running and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't know what's going on. You don't know when you're going to get to the end. But if you have a finish line, if you have a goal, you can set your sights on. It's much easier to focus, make a plan. Anyway, let's get back to my story. I'll get through this real quick.
Right, yeah, and I definitely want to pay close attention to your military story, just because we have so many people, friends and family who are in the military, and the first thing they seem to do is buy their dream car and never seem to save anything. But your story is completely different, so I hope that you can be a guide to those people if they're listening or just enlisting on how to set this strong financial foundation for your future and eventual freedom.
Yeah, you have a lot of intelligence there.
Right. So, you kind of told us you kind of had a weak financial background growing up, and, your family was even depending you as a 9-year-old to kind of bring some income in to create some of that stability. Mm-hmm. But if you want to keep it going with your story.
Yeah, so here's where it gets weird. At like 12 or 13, I turned 13 on the way over, but at 12 or 13, I moved to Africa, a country called Equatorial Guinea. It's a very small country, maybe a million people. I lived there for 6 years, and they speak Spanish there, so I became fluent in Spanish, and I'm still fairly, pretty fluent. I just, it's kind of interesting because I had someone call me from there today, like over Facebook. Yeah, over a Facebook video. So we chatted at lunch, and he was actually he was asking me how he could he could join the U.S. military.
Wow.
So it's just coincidental.
Tell him to listen to this episode in a couple days.
Yeah. And so I had a bunch of crazy adventures over there, but that's for another time,
But so that's quite a life-changing
right.
switch.
Was that just you and your parents? Do you have siblings?
Go to Africa, yeah.
So
what brought you there?
I have there are 4 kids in my family, 3 siblings, and the whole family moved. My parents were missionaries, volunteer missionaries. Mm-hmm. Volunteer means they didn't get paid, so they had to find a way of making money. Oh, wow. And my dad didn't work. He was like taking care of the church and other stuff. So my mom decided to open up sort of a bakery in her house. We started selling cakes, and I agreed. My mom was like, "You guys want to move to Africa?" I'm like, I don't know.
I'm 12.
And then, I was 12, and I was like, I didn't really know. And I told her, okay. At this point, we were selling flowers, and it was like an everyday thing, and I hated it so much. And I agreed to go if I could stop selling flowers.
But flour makes cake.
Oh, yeah, no, the plant.
I know.
And then we switched to the other type of flour. Yeah, so now I had to go. We were the only white family in the city, and you had these 2 white kids walking around selling cakes on the street. So it was pretty interesting. But
You
after a
should have
while,
been more specific. Now, I want to stop selling things.
yeah, I didn't think that was going to happen. You know, it was kind of weird. But after about a year, I graduated high school, and about a year after that, I came back to the States because I didn't really see my life going anywhere over there. And I was 19, and I did stuff with church in the U.S. for a year, and then I moved to California, Pasadena, for anyone who knows that town. I worked. I went to school. I was working like random jobs. I worked at a shoe store in downtown Pasadena. I worked as some rich old lady's gardener. I worked in an As Seen on TV warehouse. You know, I was really, there was a lot of culture shock. I knew so little. I was already sheltered when I lived in America. And then having lived in Africa and coming back to America, it was a complete culture shock. I didn't know how things worked. I didn't know anything about money. You know, I didn't know, like when I went to school, I was just taking random courses.
You were in college at this point?
Yeah, I was
college?
20. I was 20. Yeah.
And you're by yourself, right? None of your family moved back with you?
No, I had no support system. I was basically the ultimate immigrant, you know?
Wow.
And so it was pretty scary. You know, I had a lot of, it was pretty scary. And I was making, at the time, I was making about $1,000 a month, you know, working the different odd jobs, and which wasn't enough. I mean, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, which was $750, which obviously I couldn't afford. So I found two other poor guys who also couldn't pay their rent. And we were splitting that.
In a very 1-bedroom, 3 guys.
In a 1-bedroom, like 400 square feet or something like that.
Wow.
It was pretty ridiculous. But I was spending more than I was making. So I ended up putting gas and groceries on credit cards. And so by the time I turned 21, I had something like $4,500 in debt, which to me seemed completely insurmountable because, you know, I wasn't making enough. How was I going to pay it off, you know? And so I ended up joining the military because that was kind of, they would give me some structure. I didn't know what to do. So they would give me some structure. They would give me a paycheck. They would tell me what to do. So I wanted someone to tell me what to do.
Yeah, that's a scary place to be. You know, you're a young person, you're trying to make it in this world, and then the debt just keeps rising, and it's almost like a hopeless situation. I'm sure there's many people in that boat, you know, and so
especially in your case, no safety nets to fall back
family,
on, you know.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, no safety net
scary.
whatsoever. And I think my mentality is the way it is precisely because of the way I grew up, because I had no safety net, because I only had one shot at anything. I had to make it work, you know. I had no clue how people made money. I had no clue how to navigate American society. I still had a very strong scarcity mindset from growing up and from being in Africa. When you enter the military, you take an exam called the ASVAB, which is Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's like general knowledge questions. They have like 5 or 6 different topics, like math and science and general knowledge and computers and mechanics and stuff like that.
I know you went to the Air Force. Is that all military or just Air Force?
That's all military.
Okay.
Yeah, the ASVAB is you take it at MEPS, the processing center, and you can take the ASVAB without having to join the military. It's just kind of you know, they'll kind of pressure you to join if you score high enough. But so I scored high enough to become a linguist, and I only found this out later when my recruiter pushed me to become a linguist because he got an extra $1,000 bonus if he recruited him. But they sent me, so I joined the military in January of 2006. I became a linguist, and I studied Pashto, which is at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, which is a language that is spoken in southern Afghanistan and northern Pakistan.
Oh, interesting.
So the Taliban speak it. So I spied on the Taliban. So, and it was very hard. We were basically guinea pigs in that course. There was no, Pashto is such a, one of my Farsi teachers told me that, and these are her words, not mine. Pashto is a backwards language spoken by cavemen. And it's so, I don't know, it's sort of true because so few people, people who speak Pashto are sort of the rednecks of Afghanistan. They tend never to leave the country. And so those who do tend to be more educated. And speak other languages too. Where they were one of my teachers. We had no certified teachers. One of them was previously a medical doctor, and the other one was a gas station attendant. So just anyone who could speak the language, because it was 2006. The war on terror was in full swing. Afghanistan was, going strong.
Wow.
And
Can you
so
say hello, how are you in Pashto?
Yeah, salam alaikum, tsangaye.
Okay. What other languages do you know?
So Pashto, I'm decent in. I could still, get around. I haven't used it in like 5 years, but I have a whole stack of books that are in Pashto that I bought when I was in Afghanistan, and I can still read it all right. I can still speak it all right. Fairly fluent in Spanish. I also know some French. I took that in high school in Africa. They only had two choices, English and French, and I spoke English better than my teacher, so French it was. There's also German, because my parents are German. I understand it somewhat. It's harder to read, but I can understand it.
That's awesome. 5 languages.
What else? Since I know Spanish, I can get by with all other Romance languages, Portuguese, Italian,
Amazing.
And my wife is Korean, and so I'd like to say I'm currently working on Korean, but I've discovered that to learn languages, I really need to either be immersed, like I was with Spanish, or I need to have an official class. And so, despite I live near LA, where there's a giant Korean community, but I can't find a single Korean class that's within a half hour. So it's kind of weird. Anyway, so while I was in the military, I went to Afghanistan by choice, because they don't send Air Force linguists over there. They do things through technology. And I did that because I wanted to practice my Pashto. I wanted to get better at it, and so I found that the best time to practice was on Fridays, when they had an open air market, a bazaar, which is actually the Pashto word for markets, bazaar.
Huh.
Yeah.
I know.
And I think it comes from Arabic. Yeah. Pashto is it's a weird language. It follows other languages down dark alleys, beats them up, and searches their pockets for loose grammar.
So okay, let's.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm just kind of interested. So you're joining the military, and you're finally getting a steady paycheck as a military employee, enlisted airman, and how does that change you, or how does that feel for you going through finally getting some kind of financial stability?
Oh, it was so good. I felt more secure because I was finally making more than I needed.
Right.
So I came in making, it was something like $1,400 a month. I think it was like $18K a year, 18.5, something like that, which wasn't bad, but it seems very low to most people, to most civilians. But keep in mind, 18-year-olds, no college education, going in there, their housing and food is covered. So imagine if your housing and your food were covered and you were still receiving $18,000 a year as an 18-year-old with no education. That's fairly substantial. Unfortunately, many people, what they do is they get taken advantage of by the people right off base selling cars. They know exactly how much you make because those the charts are on the internet. They're like, oh, I know you make exactly this much. So if I'm going to say, oh, this car is only this many dollars a month, that's less than your paycheck. So in your mind, so many people get tricked into buying way too expensive cars. But I was, I came from a scarcity mindset, so I didn't buy a new car. I never felt the need to show off. I bought when I joined the military, I had, the $4,500 in debt, which I quickly started paying off. About a year and a half later, I crashed and totaled my car, which had been paid off. It was a $2,000 car when I bought it. And so I had to buy a brand new one. And, I didn't have to buy, I had to buy a new one, but I chose to buy a brand new one, which was not that smart. But fortunately it was an economic car. It was a Toyota Corolla.
Nice.
I still have it. It's going on like 190,000 miles almost.
Nice.
Haven't had any major repairs. I mean, I had to replace the catalytic converter about 6 years ago. That's about it.
Wow.
So when I was in the military, I made up to about $65,000 a year. My lowest was, like 18. And as I ranked up, I got more pay. And as I was in longer, I got more pay. So I ended up And they also gave me, after a few years, they allowed me to live off base. And when you live off base, especially if you're married, but the Air Force tends to be more lenient with its single service members, they pay you a stipend. And that stipend generally is enough to get like a 2-bedroom apartment, something like that. And of course, I never got the 2-bedroom apartment. I always went for things that were cheaper, so if they gave me, one specific example, if they gave me $1,550 a month for rent, my apartment cost me $900. So I was pocketing $500 or $600, and all that money went to savings. And then after I got out of debt, it went to investing. And so in March 2010, so about 4 years after I joined the military, 4 years and 2 months, I was completely out of debt. My cards were paid off. My car was paid off. And I started all that money that I was putting towards my credit card payments. I started dumping it into my retirement accounts, my Roth IRA, my thrift savings plan, which is the TSP. It's a military version of a 401k, which I would highly recommend to anyone listening to this. If you have access to a TSP, it's no longer the cheapest, but it is one of the cheapest. It has one of the lowest fees out there. It's 0.038% annually of fees. So if you have $1,000 in there, for every $1,000, they charge you 38 cents a year.
Wow.
And compare that to more actively traded funds, more people who say they'll manage your money for you. And they pick stocks and stuff that can run upwards of 1%, which is if you have $1 million in there, that's $10,000 a year that you're paying that guy to handle your money. So keep your fees low, and the TSP is a great way to do that.
So wait, just want to reiterate. So you said, after 4 years enlisted, you were back to net zero, right? Like you had paid off your loans, you had paid off your cars, but you told me after you left the military 8 years in, so from zero, you were zero debt halfway through, and then 4 years later, you had $144,000 you left with.
Crazy, right?
That is crazy.
Yeah,
4 years time.
2 years and 9 months, and remember how I was saying, any money they gave me, I always tried to spend as little as possible of it. Didn't matter what it was. Money's money. You find $1 on the street, or you are given $1 for something. That's still $1. And so whenever I went on TDY, which is temporary duty, they would pay you what's called per diem. So they give you a living allowance, like to purchase food. And generally when you go somewhere, they expect you to have to eat at restaurants and stuff. So it tends to be fairly high, like $100 a day. I never spent all that. I would always go to the grocery store or eat at McDonald's. And even at McDonald's, I would always choose the lowest amount possible. So instead of spending $8 on a meal, I would spend $3 for an equivalent amount of food off the dollar menu, and pocket that extra $5, because I know that every single dollar I'm able to save now is $20, $30, $40, $50 I don't have to save down the road. So it's I always had that in my mind, and keeping in mind my previous life of scarcity, the anxiety I have related to poverty and not having a support system. I had to get to I had to have an emergency fund. I had to get to a position of safety, which is basically why I do all this. It's not because I want to be rich. I want to be safe. I don't care about being rich.
You also mentioned, though, your parents constantly bickering about money issues and, wanting to prevent that. So I'm sure that was a huge factor, too, rolling in your mind, right? Having this pool of money that prevents all those friction points you kind of alluded to.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say statistically, right, in a marriage, one of the top points of contention is
money.
Financial stress. Yeah, so if you can alleviate that, you really are 10 steps ahead when you enter a serious relationship. So that was very smart, forward thinking of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even know it was. I just did it out of fear, But now that I know so much more about money, I realize that all these things that I did were actually the right thing to do. I couldn't have told if I'd gone back in time and talked to myself, I would have told myself to do what I was doing.
Nice.
Good.
Yeah. I even cut my own hair to save money. I had a shaven head for most of my career. And I've never been comfortable with debt because it means that, you have to pay interest to somebody. And I had no idea whether I would have a salary forever. So I needed to save it. And I prioritized, one of the big things that I did is I prioritized saving before everything else. So there's two ways of budgeting. One is a zero-based budget, or giving every dollar a name. So this much, these many dollars go to rent, these many dollars go to food, these many dollars go to this, and that, and you have no dollars left over. You assign dollars to even the fun stuff, right? So you bring in $1,000 and $1,000 goes out. They're all allocated to something. And then I don't like that. It's the traditional budget route. Most people hate it because it's very restrictive. So what I do, and what a lot of people who are pursuing FIRE tend to do, is they prioritize. So they set line items. So the first thing, most people's priorities are rent, bills, food, car payments, other stuff, clothing, whatever. But my priority was always number one, saving. And if you're in debt, that money should be going towards your debt, so you can actually save and invest. And when you prioritize saving, it tends to happen. The rent will always get paid because it's your priority, right? So if you prioritize saving at the same time as your rent, or give it the same priority, you will save. It will happen, And then whatever money I had left over, I could comfortably spend. And I think that many people benefit from this type of budgeting.
When you say you prioritize saving above everything else, was that like, hey, 18,000 is the max I can do for my 401k or my TSP. I'm going to make sure I'm allocating 18,000 right off my paycheck.
I've always tried to save as much as possible. I've always understood the value of shielding my income from taxes, like in a 401k. And so I even before I knew about this, I knew I had to save. So I was putting money into my 401k as much as I could. When I got out of debt, I was making probably 40s or 50,000, something like that. And so I was able to actually, the last 4 years of or 3 or 4 years of my enlistment, I saved half my income. Which if you're making $60,000 a year, that's $30,000 a year.
Wow.
And so that is how I was able to come out with almost 150K. Jeez. Because I was saving half my income.
So you must have been living quite humbly. If you prioritize rent and then savings, then everything else is secondary. You had to make a lot of sacrifices, I'm sure, for you to carry out that kind of a savings rate.
Sort of. I mean, there are. It's not like what you think, I didn't really deprive myself. I never felt deprived. I felt, wow, I have all this extra money and I choose to save for my future with it. I have enough money to buy like a sports car, a Ferrari, but I don't, because to me, it's just a car, it just gets you from A to B. You can show off, but rich people tend to realize that at a certain point, it doesn't bring you any value to show off. In fact, you want to not show off because that tells people you have money and they're going to hit you up for it. So just keep it on the DL. Be fairly humble. And so I don't even wear a watch. So.
And still driving that Toyota Corolla.
Still driving that almost 190,000 miles on
nice.
it.
Yeah, I'm driving a Toyota Yaris. Roll up windows.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when I hit 100,000, I was about 28, and I had I set my goal to since it was so easy to make that 100,000 relatively, I was like, wow, I could totally make $1 million by 40. So that became my goal. I don't know how I'm going to reach it yet. I still have to increase my income. And even if I don't make that goal, I'm hoping I will, but even if I don't make that goal, I'll still have saved up a lot of money and be in such a better position than so many of my peers, that spent all their money when they were in the military. So the military, let's see. Going back to the deprivation, just so you know, I was spending, after I got out of debt, I started spending a lot more. Like some months I spent $800 on eating out, so I wasn't depriving myself. I just thought, like, this thing that I'm buying, is there a better way to get it for cheaper? And to me, the convenience of eating out was, made up for it. But because I was saving so much, I just I was like, oh, okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't feel that way anymore. I would much rather now make my own meal or eat at home. Because I want to get to financial independence as quickly as I possibly can, so I don't have to worry about it anymore, and then I can do whatever I feel like for the rest of my life.
What is that financial independence number for you? Is that $1 million?
For me, I'm going to show you my my spreadsheet in a little bit, but it's right now I spend my annual expenses are about 60,000. So 25 times that, which is $5,000 a month. So we could do let's do the monthly one because it's a much easier multiplier. So 5,000 times 300, because remember the 4% rule monthly, is 1.5 million. So once I've hit 1.5 million, it means I can most likely withdraw $5,000 a month in today's money. That means so next year it'll be higher because things will cost more. So I'll have $5,000 of purchasing power with that 1.5 million for the rest of my life and never have to worry about it running out. You know, and I could leave that, and probably by the time I die and leave that to my kids, it'll be much, much greater than 1.5 million. But you know, I won't stop working. I'll just do what I enjoy and make some extra money on the side.
Right, but you'll know that you have that financial independence where, hey, your boss gives you trouble, then, hey, I'm out of here.
Exactly, yeah. So let me, oh gosh. So the military doesn't tend to give good financial education. They have personal finance classes when you in process, but it's a complete snooze. Nobody who is not interested in that finds it in the slightest interesting. You know,
and that sounds so insane. You know, you pay for all their basic needs, their housing, their food, and you give them $18,000 that year, and you expect them to be, you know, 18-year-olds, first time handling real money in their lives. And you, like you said, there's these, you know, sharpshooting car dealers out there waving their dream cars in their faces, and you expect them to make good decisions. I feel like,
I mean, they tell people off for doing that, you know, but they don't do it in a good way. They don't do it in the right way. So it's kind of irresponsible. You know. They started ever since the recession. People realized that, you know, the way things were going in the 80s and 90s, where everybody had a job, everybody got paid enough, everybody could afford to buy a house, kind of. That's no longer. So people have to figure out how to be. You can't rely on anyone. You can't rely on the government. You know, you probably won't be able to receive all the Social Security you're entitled to. So you have to make your own money. You have to learn how to do this on your own. And I just want to say that it is so possible for anyone entering the military. Officers have a much easier time because they make so much more. But even enlisted people entering the military, making, you know, $20,000 a year and slowly going up from there. After 20 years of military service, it is definitely possible for someone to retire for good. Not with the military pension, because that doesn't really exist anymore for new people. They have a blended retirement service, or I think that's what it's called, or system. But from your civilian savings, from your TSP, from your Roth IRA, from stuff you save in a brokerage account, you can retire on that money after 20 years. It's possible. If I'd stayed in, I would have been able to do that. I know people that have done that. They're few and far between, but as time goes on, as more and more people get educated on financial literacy, you'll see this happening more and more and more. It is such a simple concept and so simple to do. Not easy, but simple. You know, it has a few steps.
And you say, you know, 20 years, and if you're an 18-year-old, that's only, you're 38 years old, and you could be financially independent and retired.
Yeah.
With the rest of your life.
The military, a lot of people complain about the military, but the military's benefits are some of the best in the country. You know, you get free healthcare. You know, some people complain about military healthcare, but it was I never really had a problem, and it was completely free. So I really appreciated not having to spend money that I didn't want to. You know, all the money I ever spent was, or not all, so most of the money I ever spent was on stuff that I chose to buy, not stuff that I had to buy, you know, like healthcare and stuff. And so when you get out and have to pay for it yourself, you realize how big of a benefit that is. And so I would tell people to, when you're in the military, take advantage of your salary, you know, while you have it. Life is unpredictable. Save and invest as early as you possibly can put as much as you possibly can, as often as you can, into your investments. Don't worry what the market's doing. Just put that money away and get out of debt first, obviously. Use tuition assistance. So the military provides about $4,500 in tuition assistance. So you can go to school for free while you're in the military.
That's called the GI Bill, right?
No, that's tuition assistance, TA.
Okay.
The GI Bill is for after, and you can use the GI Bill while you're in, but the post 9/11 GI Bill, for those who have served more than 90 days after 9/11, provides you with a housing stipend. So I wouldn't recommend doing that, because while you're in the military, they're already giving you a housing stipend, so they're not going to give it to you twice.
Wow. So while you're in the military, you get this other thing called tuition assistance?
Yeah, $4,500 a year, which you can use to take classes.
Wow.
And so I knocked out half of my, with tuition assistance and with CLEPs, Dante's Excelsior tests. They're basically tests that you can use. CLEP means a college level entrance. I don't know what it means, but it's a test. So basically, instead of taking
That's not
algebra,
military specific, right? That's anyone can do CLEP?
But if you're in the military, it's free. If you're a civilian, you have to pay for it. It's like $80 or something. So take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a single CLEP test knocks out a course. So you can take a CLEP on algebra and not have to take algebra anymore.
And that'll pass you for those 3 credits of algebra.
Correct. Yeah. Wow. And I know somebody whose goal it was to take all the existing CLEPs and Dante's and Excelsior tests, and he managed to get a bachelor's degree in it was kind of worthless. It was like
out of everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was like liberal arts or something, and he never stepped foot in the school. He just took all those tests and
they
got
were
a
free
bachelor's
because he was
degree.
military?
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Free bachelor's with just taking tests.
While being active duty military.
What is that? Okay, so let's say algebra. What does that look like? Is it like a 2-hour test, 5-hour test?
Oh, it's a multiple choice test. I think it's like 30 or 90 questions. I don't know, but it's like an hour or two. It's not that big of a deal.
And you can get rid of a semester's worth of a course.
Amazing.
In a few days, yeah.
That's awesome. I never really heard of that option.
Yeah.
It's spelled CLEP.
That's cool.
Test. And also the point you bring up, which I think is really key, and a lot of people don't think about it, is that, make the most of your time while you're in the military, active duty. You know, you're caught up in of course, all of your military responsibilities, but you can always carve out your personal time and spend it either wisely or not. And what better way to spend it than, working towards your future education when it's being paid for.
Yeah, totally.
Rather than waiting until the GI Bill when you get out of the military. And then that has great benefits too, but it has a definite beginning and end and a limitation.
Yeah,
so if you can
you get 36 months. You get 36 months, which on your traditional nine month school year, not counting holidays and summer, that's 4 years. So a 4-year degree, and it's definitely possible most people can get a 4-year degree with the GI Bill. I actually managed to get a bachelor's and a master's degree, an MBA, out of my GI Bill.
So the GI Bill will cover masters as well.
The GI Bill will give you 36 months of tuition.
So whatever you can do in those 36 months, or like 4 years-ish full time, I guess.
And obviously, if you got a head start through the tuition assistance program while in the service, you can really make the most of that.
The VA, it's such a great benefit. Like the VA must have spent, because the GI Bill is through the VA, Veterans Affairs Department. They must have spent like $100,000 on my education, maybe more.
So they pay you full. They pay you full tuition, right? But there's more than that.
Your full tuition. They'll pay all the stupid fees you have to pay: the healthcare fee, the gym fee, the women's club fee, whatever it is, that everyone has to pay, and it can run into hundreds or thousands of dollars a semester, and that's completely covered. And on top of that, you get a housing stipend. If you qualify for it, you get a housing stipend. Which to me, when I first started, I wasn't receiving it for paperwork reasons, but after a while I started getting it. And so I got 2 solid years I was living in San Diego, so I got over $2,000 a month in housing. It ended up being, I think the last few months were like $2,600, which is, you can definitely, if you do it right. So many people don't do it right. they spend all of that money. They don't save any of it, but you can live off of that amount of money. You could get a roommate. You could live in someone's house. You could,
right. So even if you had $1,000 a month apartment, you'd still collect the $2,600 and just keep the $1,600 left over.
Yeah, it's your choice to how you live. They just give you the money.
Awesome.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible.
That's amazing.
So other things I want to say is,
do they cover books at all too?
Yeah. So every year they give you $500 a semester, and there's 2 giant semesters. So they give you $1,000 a year for books and supplies. And the bad news is that given the price of textbooks nowadays, I spend more than $1,000 a year on books and supplies.
Yeah.
But I
that's a
didn't
big
care.
help anyway.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I didn't care because I was getting money, so it ended up being a net positive for me. Other things I want to say, this is just kind of like tangential, but related. Don't be afraid to start from the bottom and work up. So when I got out of the military, I didn't have a job for a few months. And here's me, I had managerial experience. I made it up to a staff sergeant, which is an E5, which is a lower to mid-level manager in the military. I had managerial experience. I had a relatively high-paying, essentially what was a corporate job. I spoke multiple languages. I had a bunch of savings. I had a head for finances. And what did I do? I went with the first company who would hire me, and that was UPS. And how do you get into UPS? You go in through the warehouse. And here's me with, like the guy in,
nice UPS shirt, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I came, I just came back from work. This is what I wear to work. So I went in as a loader. I did manual labor. So I went from that
almost
job,
a white collar qualification, and you chose more of a blue collar starting point.
That wasn't even blue collar. That's like lowest of the low manual labor, making $10 an hour, breaking my back. It was pretty bad, but I knew it was only temporary. I knew once I got in, I had my foot in the door.
Right.
And so I quickly moved up to supervisor. And now I was supervising the guys who were loading. It was double the pay. And then when I finished my degree, I moved up in UPS to the position of financial analyst. I applied and got it. And that all came from just under 5 years ago, doing something from the bottom, and starting to move up. But you have to, so don't be afraid of that. There's no job, I would tell anyone, there's no job that should be beneath you. It's actually helpful if you can do this kind of job, at least at some point in your life, because you kind of understand what people go through, so you're not like this out of touch rich person.
But I really love that creativity too, because I feel like, especially in today's market, the job markets are so competitive, and I feel like a lot of young people, regardless of whether they start in the military or they just went to college and got out of college, they're trying to go for that big name position, which is, really competitive and hard to get. And they're finding, that they're hitting brick walls, they just can't get an in. And I think that you bring up an excellent point, well, if you can't get through the door, go around the door, start or go
to the back of the, dig a hole under the wall, or go to the back. Yeah. Go to the back of the building, find an open window,
Right.
figure a way out.
That is brilliant. That's such a brilliant thought process that, it's just temporary and it's getting your foot in the door. You don't need to define yourself by the position you're in. You have a vision, you have a goal, and just start at a place where you can eventually work up from there. That's really inspiring.
Right. Another thing I want to mention is that education is incredibly important. And, you might say, oh, yeah, you have a master's degree. Of course you think that. But don't conflate education with college. It's not the same. College is a shortcut to education because they guide you. They tell you what to do. They teach you. They spoon feed you the stuff. They teach you how to think. But everyone should educate themselves, even if they don't go to college. You should learn, expand your knowledge, expand your skill set, become indispensable to whoever you work for. Or work for yourself. I mean, there's also that option. I'm not comfortable with that, despite having an MBA, because those people are supposed to start businesses or help the CEO or something like that. But I am not comfortable with the kind of risk that comes along with running your own business. So I decided to work for somebody, have them pay me, have that secure paycheck, and then invest my money into somebody else's business, which is essentially what stocks are. And so if I only went to college, like right now, if things didn't turn out the way they were, I would still be, a high school graduate. I only went because college was paid for. Otherwise, I would have chosen a different path. I would have gone to trade school. I would have learned how to be a plumber. You pay $2,000 or whatever to get your education as a plumber, and then you're making six figures after a few years. So there's nothing wrong with any line of work as long as you do it right. I have no more respect for a CEO than I do for like a garbage man. They're doing their job. They're making money. There's several people who've managed to become millionaires and retire early on minimum wage. So have you guys heard of Ronald Reed?
No.
So Ronald Reed was he was an unassuming guy. He was very frugal. He never bought like new clothes. When they fell apart, he would pin them together with safety pins. So everybody thought he was poor. He never really made more than minimum wage. I think at his peak, he was making $12 an hour. He worked as a janitor and a gas station attendant, basically until the day he died at 92. But they discovered that he had, when he died, he had $8.3 million.
Oh my gosh.
And that's because he started saving in his 30s. So it's really never too late. And if you can start saving at 18, that's even better. You can hit a millionaire. You can become retired by 30 if you do it right. If you make a relatively high amount of income and save half of it or more, you can retire at 30. It's definitely possible. And most people can retire at 40 if they start at 20. Yeah, so work as hard as you can, learn as much as you can. Remember, it's only temporary. All the inconvenience is only temporary. You don't want to be, and another reason for education is you don't want to be a cassette salesman when MP3s are invented.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So don't stick in something. Constantly improve yourself. And for those who have no idea what to do with their life, like I did, I didn't know what to do. I was hoping somebody would tell me what to do, but nobody did. The military is a great option. It's not for everyone, and there's a lot of bad stuff. But if from purely the benefits perspective and from the job perspective, it's a good option for people who are considering. But I would always recommend to leave yourself an out in anything you do. Leave yourself an out. Have a contingency plan, a plan B. With the military, that means enlisting for the shortest possible enlistment you can. So in the Air Force, you can either choose to go 4 or 6 years. I know many people that did 6 years, and then when 4 years rolled around and some people were getting out, they're like, oh, I should have done 4 years. But that extra $4,000 in bonus was, I wanted that money, but then they say it wasn't worth it. So leave yourself an out, do the 4-year enlistment or the 2-year or whatever you can swing. And then if you like it, continue doing it.
That's a smart thing, to keep your options open.
Keep your options open, yeah.
So that you're making the choice to continue or not, rather than, being trapped in whatever decision you make. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Because then you value what you're doing more, and you feel more purpose from it.
Definitely. I've noticed that with UPS too, where many other people didn't have the same mentality that I had. They were just loading boxes. It was a crappy job. It was what it was. But I saw past that. I did as good a job as I could to not ingratiate myself with my bosses, but to show that I was a good worker, so I could be selected for advancement. So everything I did was a stepping stone to something better. And the military also gives you a skill. It gives you education. It gives you discipline, and it gives you maturity for the most part. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah, I remember that story of kind of doing the best you can, or like giving it your all, even at a menial job. It seems menial to you, but it's important. It's a function that needs to be done by someone, and if you can really put your heart and soul into it, I think you get recognized. And I remember even for myself, as an engineer, my boss came around to the engineers and was like, hey, you know, we need some support, you know, putting in credit card orders. And engineers like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not putting credit card orders. Make the admins do it. But there was no admins to do it. And, you know, I went ahead and I started doing those credit card orders. Like one of the only engineers who like listened and was like, okay, I'll help you guys out. And I remember a year later, my boss, it was like my boss's boss, and he approached me. It's like, I'm giving you this, you know, like promotion just because you did that small menial task.
Oh yeah, they notice. You know, you make your boss's life easier, they notice.
Right.
I kept telling myself that, you know, when I didn't understand it so much when I was loading, but when I became a supervisor, I got things that would make my boss's life easier. And so I try to do that. You know, I talked about getting out of debt, right? Before you start saving, you need to get out of debt. Albert Einstein said that those who understand compound interest earn it, and those who don't pay it. So he also said compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world. It's sort of, there's an analogy I like to use of a rowboat. So when you're in debt, you're rowing upstream. Your efforts are kind of wasted because the current is taking them away from you. When you're investing, it's the opposite of being in debt. You're investing. That means the interest is actually working for you. So it's like rowing downstream. So each push of the oar pushes you from your own effort, but also the water, the current. It pushes you a little further.
I remember
you and your money are working together versus you rowing upstream and kind of battling against your money, which is...
It's stealing the stream is stealing your momentum.
Right. And I remember you saying when we were talking offline that you left the military with like a $50,000 in your thrift savings plan, and to this day, you know, 4 years later, it's grown to like 80,000, 30% more, which is crazy.
Yeah. Like 5 years it grew. Actually, like 3 years it grew to like 86,000. But then the market went sideways for a bit. But
still, it's that current moving you along, even though you're not paddling anymore. You're not contributing.
Yeah, I did the math, and I will have enough just from that $50,000 I had saved up in my TSP. I will have enough to retire at 65.
That's awesome.
Never having, I mean, I saved a whole bunch more, but just with that 50,000, compounding at 8%, and it'd probably do more. I personally believe the stock market has a lot of upside in the future. It's not as bad as some people think it is. But I'll be a millionaire from just that $50,000.
Yeah, no, I believe it, because you know, I did the calculation too. My son has $3,000 in his Roth IRA right now. He's 4 years old, and I did the math. You know, when he's 60, you know, it's like 60 years from now, that $3,000, if we don't put any more money in it, it'll grow to $300,000 when he's 60.
Crazy.
You know, which is crazy. It's that
but of course he will.
Rate.
He will put more in, you know?
Yeah. But even if he didn't, you know, that's just $3,000 we put into at this point, this small amount we put in at this point just grows and grows and grows. It's traveling on that stream for the next 60 years, growing. Yeah.
And going faster and faster and faster.
Right.
You know, there's no limit to it. When you see a chart of compound interest, which way? Anyway, it looks like most people think, you know, you're adding, so it's kind of a straight line, but it's not that, because growth goes on top of growth. It's exponential, so it goes up like that. It almost goes vertical after a while. It looks like, you know.
Right. Awesome.
So another thing I wanna talk about is to keep your fees low. I know earlier I mentioned the TSP has some of the lowest fees in the industry, so it's good to put your money there. But even if you don't know how to invest, or if you're not in the military, try to find index funds, which are funds that contain all the stocks in an index, like the S&P 500, or you can just buy a total market fund that contains all the stocks in the US. Because it's been shown that, Fidelity is a brokerage account, a financial firm, and they did a study because they have millions of investors on their platform. They did a study they wanted to see which group of investors performed the best. Was it the people who had PhDs in economics, MBAs, you know, bachelor's degree in finance or whatever? And they found out, and generally people don't tend to guess this, so I'm not going to ask, but the number one group of people that had the highest return were debt investors. People that didn't have access to their money anymore.
Right, so not day traders.
Not day traders.
Dead traders.
You guess what dead traders? Yeah, they don't trade at all. And can you guess what the second most successful group of investors were? People who had forgotten they had an account.
Isn't that crazy?
It's been proven time and time again that the passive approach generally outperforms active trading and stock picking. Of course, you'll always have people like Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch and many other really, really successful investors who do very well and become billionaires by picking stocks. But chances are you are not that person. Mm-hmm. You're an average investor. So your best bet is just to go with the flow of the market, because if you try to time the market, if you try to pick the companies that are going to be big, it's been proven that most investors underperform by trying to pick stocks. So stick with the low cost index, especially if you don't know what you're doing. That passive route, investing is one of the only disciplines where not knowing stuff is a benefit. Like I wouldn't want my doctor not to know stuff, but So
don't try to outsmart the market. Basically.
Don't try to outsmart the market, because
basically your general advice seems to be, once you pay down your debts, try to max out these like 401ks and IRAs. Is that pretty much right? With low cost index funds.
Yeah, you want the order you want to do it in is first your 401k match, then your Roth IRA, and then the rest of your 401k. And if you have an HSA, you want to do that one first as well, a health savings account. But that doesn't apply for military, because you guys have your health care for free.
Does that carry on after you are out of active duty?
It depends. I'm a combat vet, so I get some health care through the VA, but I still have to pay some small co-payments. I'm actually not entirely certain how it works, but I'm very lucky to just from my short period in the military, I have all these residual benefits that will stay with me, hopefully for the rest of my life, as long as funding continues to be, Congress continues to allocate funding for that.
Yeah. So I kind of want to just, I know a lot of people listening might not be familiar with, 401ks, might not be familiar with IRAs, with index funds or low cost fees. We were talking about a 1% administrative fee or expense fee being so high. They don't even understand that. Is there a book or resource you kind of recommend for the complete newbie to kind of get started, who wants to learn more, just doesn't want to take your advice to buy a total market fund?
So the best book I can recommend is called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. And if you don't want to spend the money on the book, you can get it from the library, or you can also, if the library doesn't have it, you can also go to his blog. And I have a financial group on Facebook, which is uncreatively titled Financial Stuff, because it was originally, I started in 2015 as kind of a repository for financial articles I found. And I wanted somewhere where I could save all those things. And then I figured, well, might as well just put it on Facebook if anybody else wants to read it. Now it's got hundreds of members. I haven't really marketed it. It's just been growing organically. But you can find it there. I have a pin to the top. I have the link to that blog, and I also have a spreadsheet I'd like to show you guys. But before I do, let me just I'll be done with my notes in like 2 minutes.
Sure.
So another thing, don't ever take things for granted. Things can change in an instant. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses. That basically means, when your neighbor has a shiny car, you feel the need to get a shiny car or a bigger house or a fancier watch or something. Don't do that, because chances are the Joneses are in deep debt trying to buy all those things to show up.
Living
to
paycheck to paycheck.
Living paycheck to paycheck. So don't care what people think about you, because have your own self-worth and your own motivation. You know what you want to do. You know what you're about. So I would rather have my money working for me than looking shiny in my driveway. An example of a car. Live below your means. Here's something interesting. When I first joined UPS, or when I first got hired onto UPS, I was making $10 an hour, which means I was bringing home maybe $800 a month, maybe $900 on some months. My rent was $500 a month. Fortunately, included food because I lived with my sister. And so that really doesn't leave me much wiggle room for all the other expenses, right? But I made a point because I didn't know. I mean, I knew my income would probably go up, but I assumed it never would. You know, I assumed I always had to live within my means or below my means. So even though I had I had a lot of money saved up by that time, I didn't dip into it. I lived within my means. You know, I didn't buy because $300 a month isn't a lot for toiletries and gas and stuff like that. So I lived within my means. I didn't buy anything unnecessary until I got until 7 months later when I got the promotion. So didn't buy as much as a candy bar, but again, it was only temporary. You know, I was only doing it for a little bit. When you put money aside into your savings, assume it's gone, you know, until you retire, which, you know, if you do it the right way, will be in, you know, a few short years, right?
I love that self-discipline though, because it definitely takes a lot of self-discipline and knowing why you're doing it. So that's great, because it's a very tempting moment there to dip into your savings, you know, when you're don't have that many funds at hand. But that's a great point. Just put it there and forget about it.
Yeah, it was more important to me, the inconvenience I experienced, or the short-term pleasures that I got from, you know, going out to eat or whatever I wanted to do was didn't compare to the future happiness I would get from what that money could give me down the road. And another thing I want to say is just because somebody made money in a certain way doesn't mean it will work for you. You know, you can make lots of money with real estate, but I don't personally like dealing with people. You know, I don't like dealing with tenants who won't pay. I don't like fixing broken roofs. I'm always worried about something bad happening. So that's why I just leave my money with stocks and have the board of directors of those companies handle it for me. Let's see. So people's new car will be dull in 10 years and you'll have enough money to buy several better cars. You know, so people that bought their brand new Mercedes-Benz 10 years ago when we were both broke, that car is probably gone by now. But I have enough money to buy a Ferrari.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Or even an even better brand new Mercedes-Benz. So get things as cheaply as possible to meet your needs. So there's no real need to, if you're just a single person, there's no need to get a 2-bedroom apartment. Just rent a room in a house. Save that money. Do something with it, you know? Elon Musk, he challenged himself. I think it was $2 a day. He challenged himself to see whether it was possible to live. It was $1 or $2 a day for a month, and he discovered it was possible. So it's mostly like oranges and noodles, peanut butter, stuff like that. So in a pinch, it's very possible to get by on very little money. You just have to be willing just have to know what's a necessity in the sense of like what an animal would need, or like a caveman, and what's a want or a luxury.
You did that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was making $800 a month. So, yeah, I did that. I always thought to myself, okay, so also with the example of McDonald's, right? Instead of spending $8 on a meal, I would just buy $3 off the dollar menu and pocket the extra $5.
That's a good point, and that's a good strategy too, to challenge yourself, you know. To keep within a budget, like what do you truly need and what is simply a want.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend, checking out your financial group too, because, that was what I was kind of really impressed with you sharing all your financial knowledge, all your findings. And I know you said, that's record keeping for yourself, but it's helped so many people and, keeping this thought of personal finance in the minds of a lot of people. So, if more people, like what you're saying, like what you're sharing, how can people reach out to you, Paul?
The best way is either through Facebook or by my email, pysteph@hotmail.com.
Cool.
pysteph@hotmail.com. So if anybody wants to communicate with me, have any questions, if you'd like to see something added to the file, or something could be optimized, let me know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much. I think we all learned so much about the military, about how to optimize your savings while being enlisted, but not just military. I think a lot of it was applicable for anyone, especially how to just save a large portion of your money, make those sacrifices for that financial independence and safety, and, just to make a smoother, easier life by making those harder choices, those sacrifices earlier on, and really propelling your journey forward. So again, thank you, Paul, so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to catch you around.
Thanks.
So we hope you enjoyed the majority of this episode. You know, we're going to do something a little different because we go into some technical details with a spreadsheet. You know, it's this great money file that Paul created and wants to share with everyone. He gives us the URL to download that spreadsheet. But we really encourage, if you do want to hear the last 20 minutes of this episode, to actually maybe not listen to it on audio. You won't get that much value. Hop on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/famvestor, and click on episode 18 and watch those last 20 minutes where he guides us through his spreadsheet. You know, it's kind of like the spreadsheet I've shared, but it's expanded so much more. And it's especially if you are someone who does already track every single line item of your expenses, this is perfect for you. It's so encompassing. It tells you all your finances, and so definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it really gives you a good financial snapshot of not only where your money's going, but including trending money habits. Like, it track your finances for a year, and you can see exactly how much you're spending in a certain area of your life. You know, are you spending on entertainment? Is that going up or down on a year spread? You know, just
Right.
kind of give you a really comprehensive picture.
And my financial spreadsheet, you know, the Finja Financial Ninja spreadsheet, is really good as a planning tool. You know, it'll say, you know, I estimate that I'm going to have $60,000 in expenses and therefore a $40,000 saving rate. His tool goes even further and says, okay, you planned for $60,000, but what you actually spent was $65,000. And that's really powerful. So it's a great tool, something to dig into. And he gives us the URL so you can download the Excel spreadsheet yourself and start utilizing it. So anyway, at this point with the audio, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Definitely take to heart all those actionable tips he mentioned. You know, just, you know, even though if you get this housing payment, don't take the full max, you know, live below your means. Instead of spending $2,000 using the full housing payment, live at $1,000 house, room share, live for $500, save $1,500, you know, make those small sacrifices now that add up to so much growth in the future. You know, just pave that financial roadway as much as possible.
I loved the story he shared about Ronald Reed, who was a minimum wage worker and still completely capable of achieving financial independence and, you know, a great savings rate, even though he's on a low income.
Right. And he shares, you know, anyone can do this, you know, even if you're just a bottom enlisted person, even if you're a UPS mover, you know, and, you know, never be too great to do those menial tasks. You know, everyone has to start somewhere, and, you know, starting somewhere is better than doing nothing, twiddling your thumbs.
View the place you're in right now as an opportunity, a stepping block towards your future. And
just constantly keep growing, you know, start from that low place, but then grow, and use that momentum to do great things. And I think that's what this whole episode was about, is, you know, starting from a small place, but growing that to something great. And something you can be proud of and respect of. And I think it's a great episode for that, starting from humble origins, but, you know, working hard, putting in the effort, putting in the sacrifice to really get to where you want to be. So with that, thank you for tuning into the episode. Feel free to listen, but definitely encourage you, hop on youtube.com/famvestor or go to famvestor.com/podcast, and you can view the episode there as well. So enjoy the rest of the episode, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you. Good luck. Godspeed.
I'm glad you brought that up. If I could share my my screen with you, let me show you something. So I made this, and for people who are not watching this, I apologize because this is going to be visual. But I'll try to explain it as best as possible so everyone sees it or can see it. So right now I have my file up, and this is the financial overview side. And what I did was I put in my income and my expenses. And the expenses I get from my expenses tab. And I'll show you that in a minute. But I basically went through and thought, how much can I realistically expect to spend over the next 12 months? And there's tabs here for weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6 months, annual. And it does the math for you and adds it all up at the bottom here. And you'll notice here, underneath that, it says spent over the last 365 days. So I have a formula in there that draws from the expenses tab and calculates how much I've actually spent over the last 365 days. And so over here, you can see that my expected expenses come out to about $53,000, but what I've actually spent over the last year is closer to $60,000. So there's a $6,000 gap. And so when you do this kind of thing, when you track your expenses, which I believe is very important, especially if you're in debt, to know where your money is going, to know what is important, what is a necessity, what you need to survive, and what's just simply a luxury or a want, something extra, right?
Right.
So for example, here, rent. I spend $16.30 a month on rent. I live in Anaheim, south of LA. It's near Disneyland. It's very expensive here. We're looking to get a new apartment. But if I were single, I might just rent a room for $800, somebody's house, So you really have to see what's necessary and what isn't. And notice here, there's calculators for when I can retire. So my current retirement date is, or when I will hit financial independence, is 2031, which is going to change over time because this is only given my current spending and income.
Yeah, but it's so powerful to have that date, like knowing that, with my current savings rate, even if I don't change anything, if I would never get an increase, I have a date for my freedom.
Right. It becomes all of a sudden
a reality,
concretely attainable.
Right.
And it's something that you therefore can justify your sacrifices, saying no to this want because you know why you're doing it and you're working towards a goal.
So can you just explain real quick, because I don't know if we went into it, like what is this spreadsheet for? How is it useful to people?
So there's a whole bunch of calculators on here, but I think what people will benefit from the most is, so the reason, or the how I got these numbers, because how do I know I spent $317 on entertainment on average, right? What I do is I input all of my expenses into this expense tab right here. As you can see, I have thousands of transactions.
8,000 transactions
8,000.
recorded.
I've been doing this since 2007, and it's when people see it, they're like, "Oh, that's too much work," but it really isn't. Here, check it out. Give me a something you spent today. So today is the 21st, August 19. How much was it?
$8.
$8. Where did you spend it at?
AC Moore. Craft supplies.
So I'll just say, ABC store.
Okay.
And the category would be crafts, right? You can give it any category you want. And I do this that was very quick to input all that, right?
Right.
But there's an even faster way. As you can see, these long names, it's because I downloaded them from the credit card website. I actually do it through my bank account. I have all my credit cards linked to my USAA account, and I just download it all in Excel, slap it together, change the categories to stuff that makes sense to me, because they have their own categories, but they don't tend to be accurate. And then what I do with all this information is in this spending breakdown tab, I've created pivot tables and charts that let you show, it's interactive, and you can see how much you spend a month on any certain.
Oh, interesting.
Any category,
area.
any particular category. You can see the average, you can see the total spent in a certain year, and you can go through the different years. These are called slicers. Unfortunately, I discovered recently that it doesn't work for older versions of Excel. I think I have Excel 2010 or 2016 or 13. I'm not sure, but even so this is very good for seeing where your money's going. And you can pick a month, any month you want, in any year you want, if you have the data backing it up. And you can see what the top 5 spending categories are. In July 2019, my biggest expense was rent, followed by, this is something else, it doesn't apply, medical, and then there's miscellaneous, and there's other. Oh, I have to fix that up a little bit. But this can always change. You can always change your categories, and you can see the total here. So it's very dynamic. You can see everything that you spend as long as you track that money. And
I
so
think
what
that's really great. I especially like that the year at a glance showing you all the categories, how you spend, because then you can see your spending trends beyond just how your money is allocated monthly, but whether you're getting more lenient in one area or another over a year-long period, to just kind of keep an eye on that.
for sure.
That's brilliant.
And so I don't budget, but I look at my past expenses and say, oh, wow, we spent, $840 on food last month. We really need to cut back a little bit.
Right,
Something
yeah.
like that. So, but it's not like, you can only spend this much on this category. It's not like that for me. It's just, first I prioritize saving and then spend whatever I want on whatever.
Right.
And so in order to do this, and I have when you download this, there's a way to download this, and I'll tell you the link later, but just input your expenses however you want to do it. Type it in or download it, and then once you type it all in, hit refresh data. Hit this refresh data button, and it will update the charts. So what else? And there's also the financial overview, which talks about how you can input how much you make, your assets. I'm not going to show what I currently have, but it's drawn from the investments tab, which you can fill out. You can do so I give 10% of any income I make to charity. And so I calculate that as well. There's a tab here for that, for income and donations. You don't need to use this. It's only if you want to. And then there's like calculators I have. There's a calculator to see how much money you'll have within so many years, depending on how much you're saving. And I use that as a tool to like illustrate stuff to people.
Well, it's really a comprehensive
money file.
Yeah, chart.
I'm trying to make it like a one-stop shop so anyone can be helped. Oh, there's another thing I almost forgot. I don't. This is my file. I don't use it in my file, but let me show you something cool. So for those who have debts, by the way, for those who have debts, I would recommend reading The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. It's a very good book. His advice, he's the best person I've found so far for getting out of debt. But then after his investment advice is not that great, and there's a lot of other things I don't like about him, but getting out of debt, he is the number one person I'd recommend people follow.
He's helped a lot of people, Dave Ramsey. Yeah.
Yeah. So Total Money Makeover is a good book to read about that. And so you can input, so this is also another tab in this file that you can download. You can input your debts. So the names of your debts right here, the balance on each of those cards or debts, and the interest rate. And it'll give you a total, how much you owe, your average interest rate, and what you're paying a month in interest. So this person is paying $140 a month in just throwing it away. It's no longer their money. They could be doing something with it. They could be a millionaire if they started saving that every month, at 18. And you can calculate how long it'll take you to pay it off by inputting, how much you want to pay. It'll take this person, if $200 a month, it'll take them 6 years to pay it off. And then if you have a payoff goal, like, okay, I want to be done with my debt in 12 months. How much do I have to pay a month? And that's this much.
Wow.
So that's it. And so now let me show you guys. I'll type it in first. Can you read this?
Yeah, so tiny.cc/CEIA5Y. That
is a shortened URL that you can, if you just put it into your web browser, it will take you to a Google Drive, a Google Drive file that you can download, this Excel file. So you can download it and then input your own expenses. And I've tried to make it as simple as possible. Anything that's orange in this file, you can edit. Anything that's not orange, don't mess with it, because it probably has formulas and stuff, so it might mess with the functionality. So just anything orange, feel free to edit.
Okay.
And that is actually, I got everything out.
Nice.
You guys have it. Excuse me. You guys have any other questions?
Fantastic. I think it's really great that you've created this tool for anyone to access. You're not charging for it. It's there for people to utilize, to get help from, and to really take control of their financial situation. And it's incredible that you went as far as to create this and have it offered to everyone. So I highly suggest anyone listening is trying to figure out a way out, check it out.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend, checking out your financial group too, because, that was what I was kind of really impressed with, you sharing all your financial knowledge, all your findings. And I know you said, that's record keeping for yourself, but it's helped so many people, and, keeping this thought of personal finance in the minds of a lot of people. So, if more people, like what you're saying, like what you're sharing, how can people reach out to you, Paul?
The best way is either through Facebook or by my email. So this is my email right here. I'll write it down. It's actually in this file. When you download this file, there's the instructions right here.
Okay.
And my email. Oh, it's not there. It's on the file, but this is my email. pysteph@hotmail.com.
Cool.
pysteph@hotmail.com. So if anybody wants to communicate with me, have any questions, if you'd like to see something added to the file, or something could be optimized, let me know.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much. I think we all learned so much about the military, about how to optimize your savings while being enlisted, but not just military. I think a lot of it was applicable for anyone, especially how to just save a large portion of your money, make those sacrifices for that financial independence and safety, and just to make a smoother, easier life by making those harder choices, those sacrifices earlier on, and really propelling your journey forward. So again, thank you, Paul, so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're gonna catch you around.
Thanks.